Joined by Tom Silverstein out at Lambeau Field, a chilly Monday night, and it looks like the remnants of the 45-30 win over the Chicago Bears is still going on here at Lambeau Field. Along with the tour, it's like the fans are still here. So, Spoon, let's just jump right in. Big win for the Packers last night, 45-30, as we said, over the Chicago Bears. Makes them 10-3 overall. Biggest takeaway from the game. Ready, go.
Offense, good. Special teams, bad.
You are a man of many words. Do you work in words for a living?
How else to sum it up? But, that's the takeaway. They have to fix their special teams. They're good enough to beat the Chicago Bears with an awful performance on special teams like that, but they're not good enough to beat Tampa Bay or Dallas or maybe even the Baltimore Ravens this week. So they got to get that corrected, and Matt LaFleur talked about it today, and we'll see how serious he really is about it.
Exactly. If you would like, go ahead and put some of your questions in the comments. We'll get to those here in just a minute. But Spoon, you said offense good, special teams bad. Let's talk about the defense then for a minute there, because they were sort of a mixed bag. Yeah. They gave up big plays, and then they made big plays themselves. Were able to give the Packers 14 points off of turnovers just from the defense. And so where do they stand right now? Is this a defense that can carry them all the way?
I don't think the Packers will ever be a team that, well, at least not in the Aaron Rodgers era, where the defense carries them. The defense just has to kind of carry its own weight and not hurt the team and create good field position and not go 15 for 15 in the red zone, where teams are scoring 15 straight times. They have to be solid, and they have to give the offense a chance. And I think they did that in the second half. They got their own 6 points from Rasul Douglas, who's a scoring machine now all of a sudden. But they really started to play better. They got a better feel for Justin Fields. And, if they have to play Lamar Jackson this week, and we'll find out whether he's going to play later in the week, it's going to be a similar situation. Baltimore will throw all kinds of things at them, and they're going to have to be up for that challenge.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because it gives me an excuse to go ahead and bring it up. I almost wanted to ask Matt LaFleur today about how Justin Fields could help prepare for Lamar Jackson, but I have learned not to ask him about the opponent on Monday. That waits until Wednesday.
Most NFL coaches are still thinking about the last game, the corrections,
But that being said, let's just look ahead. How they handle Justin Fields, what does that tell you about how they could handle Lamar Jackson if he does, in fact, play after that ankle sprain?
Well, what was surprising to me a little bit was that they already knew how to play Justin Fields. They had played Kyler Murray, and they played Patrick Mahomes. The big difference was I think the Bears kind of surprised them with some of their offensive stuff that I don't know if they've been holding it back because Justin Fields had been out. But that speed that they used with Bird and Grant really caught the Packers off guard.
And they hid
them play different.
Right, and they hid them too. Almost, it seems like they would hide Bird in the backfield and then bring him across the middle. Same with Grant, a wheel route and then get him out on the edge. So was it almost a little bit of deception and disguising there as well that was the issue?
Yeah, and I think identification. Why is Damiere Byrd in the backfield? Okay, Henry Black, you might have a one-on-one here. Force him, don't allow him to go inside. Or, he's a speed guy and he's going to just run down the field, give him some room. Or something like that. I think maybe it took them a minute to realize, what they were up against, even though they should have known that from watching film.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda. There were a couple of moments, though, that from watching film paid off. Both of them seemed to be from Rasul Douglas, the pick six, and then also Matt LaFleur pointed something out today that, I'll be honest, I never would have known to look for, and it was on the muffed punt that wasn't. Mm-hmm. When Amari Rodgers muffed the punt, Chicago recovered it. They ran it back into the end zone. You cannot advance a muffed punt, but it still would have been Chicago ball in the red zone. And instead, it came back for a flag for a Chicago player going out of bounds. Spoon, I'm going to let you take it and sort of break it down for us a little bit more here. But Matt LaFleur basically said that was not something that just happened that got them. That wasn't a break for the Packers. That was something that Rasul Douglas made happen.
He baited and I can't remember who the gunner was, but essentially he baited him as though, okay, I'm going to block you out of bounds, and he pulled up and pulled his hands back, and the guy assumed he was going to get blocked out of bounds and ran out of bounds, and that's a penalty. If you're blocked out of bounds, then you can come back. If you go out of bounds on your own, that's a penalty. And, that says a lot about Rasul Douglas. This guy is a really thinking man's player. To be hardly used on special teams, but in this situation, someone told him the rule, or he knew it from somewhere else, and he applied it. And holy cow, was that a critical play, too. Because Amari Rodgers fumbled on that play.
And instead, they had to re-kick, and Amari Rodgers had a decent little return. And of course, the Packers were able to go on and do something well. We do have a couple of questions coming in. Let's hop to them because they're things that we were going to discuss anyways.
Sure.
The first one from Levi. Great question here. Is A.J. Dillon becoming the lead back and Jones the spell back, or is Jones' knee still an issue?
It sounded so. What Matt LaFleur said was that Jones got shaken up. Now, I'm not sure what that means. If they never said they were checking him for a concussion. I don't know if he got jarred or, an upper body thing, or if it was his knee. But he didn't play much in the second half. Did he play at all? I don't think he played in the second half.
He scored 2 touchdowns in the second half, but very few snaps.
Okay.
The very first drive of the second half was a 9-play drive, 6 plays on the ground, 5 of them A.J. Dillon, 1 of them Aaron Jones, and it was the touchdown. Usually it's flip-flopped. It's Aaron Jones getting them downfield and A.J. Dillon in the red zone.
I think that was purposeful. I think that was because they had a set of plays that they wanted, and we talked about this on the podcast. They kept attacking the middle and then going outside with these screen routes. And so I think they wanted to get Chicago to start a clamp down on the middle with A.J. Dillon, knowing that he's probably just going to run between the tackles, and that's why they used him. And I think Aaron Jones would have been used more. I mean, you saw what he did on the 3-yard run was a beautiful cut behind a block. And then you saw him on that route, 28-yard touchdown route. He made a leaping catch. Really nice job of turning his body around. So I don't know who's the lead back, but I do know that they're not afraid to use either one in that role.
And they're very different backs. So it's not like you're choosing purposely one over the other, but they can be used in different situations.
Yeah, and I'm going to stick with, my viewpoint is not going to change, that Aaron Jones needs to be the bell cow, because I still think he's a big play waiting to happen. I mean, we saw it on that one run where it was just completely shut down in the middle, and he bounced it to the outside and got an 11-yard gain. And the one thing that's been lacking from him this year is like a 40, 50, 60-yard run, and they need to get some more of those from him. But yeah, he needs to be on the field, and they're going to have to, work this through and figure out when is it best to have Dillon on and when to have Jones.
Linda asked, did Kevin King play much? She was at the game and didn't notice. He played, but not much.
Only a couple of snaps that I saw. He came in, I think, after Rasul Douglas's interception, because I think he was gassed after returning that. And then they scored on Bird's touchdown, I think. It wasn't Kevin King's fault. Everybody wanted to blame him for it just because he was on the field. But, yeah, he didn't play much, and he's going to have a hard time getting back on the field.
And that's not even necessarily indicative of Kevin King. That's just how well Eric Stokes and Rasul Douglas have been playing.
Absolutely.
So let's just go ahead and jump to this as well. Matt LaFleur sort of evaded the question when asked this today. But what happens when Jair Alexander's ready to come back? And I know we talked about this on the podcast, but, let's just recap here too.
Yeah, I think LaFleur said, let's cross that bridge when we get to it, is basically what was saying, and I agree with them. They'll figure that out when Jair Alexander comes back, if he comes back. There's no guarantee of that. So I would say that, they'll figure it out. One of those guys might just have to be a dime corner. Maybe they stick with Chandon Sullivan in the slot, and, maybe they need Stokes one game, to cover a really speedy guy. And maybe the next game they need Douglas to cover a real physical receiver. And so they can mix and match with those guys. It's a nice problem to have.
Exactly. You can never have too many corners. Levi asks, Preston Smith at 7 sacks, what number does he have to reach to hit those incentives after taking the pay cut? He hit an incentive last night. I think he did.
I need to check. I have all those incentives written down. I wrote a story on it when it happened. But I can't remember what it is. I know if he gets back to whatever he did last year, he makes all the money he made. He got taken away, I think $4 million. So I think there's $4 million in incentives out there for him to make. But I'll have to go back and check. Maybe I'll write a note on that later this week.
It's interesting. And I think if he gets another sack, he hits another incentive. But yeah, we'll double check that. Rick, with the question of the hour and all of the scenarios, we need a flow chart for this. Can either of you explain if Tampa Bay, Arizona, and Green Bay win out the rest of the season, who hosts home field advantage? Arizona?
Yeah, Arizona. So I think the question you probably want to ask is, what happens if Arizona, Tampa, and Green Bay finish in a three-way tie? Mm-hmm. So the first tiebreaker is conference record amongst the three teams. So if one team has a better conference record, then that team is the winner. Okay. Let's say two teams have better conference record than the third. The third is eliminated, and then you do the head-to-head tiebreaker with the two. So let's say Tampa is eliminated. Packers are 8-4, and Arizona's 8-4, and Tampa is
in conference
7-5, or my math's terrible. Whatever, 7-5. So Tampa's eliminated, and then you go head-to-head, and the Packers would win head-to-head with Arizona, and so they would be the number one seed. So conference record is what to look at from this point on.
And the Packers' conference record is...
They have...
one of their losses was to Kansas City.
So they have 2 losses, and I believe Tampa Bay has 3. Okay. And Arizona's 2 losses are to Green Bay and San Francisco? I think theirs are both
San Francisco
NFC.
Too, but I may be pulling that out of
there. I think they're both their losses are both NFC losses as well.
Okay. So, that is one to watch. Of course, Arizona plays the Rams tonight. Could end up being a huge game when it comes to seeding.
And for those who wanted the Rams, I saw Jalen Ramsey and their tight end, Taylor Higbee, are both tested positive and are out.
Ooh, there were over high 30s of positive tests today, according to Adam Schefter. Packers had a bye week. Is there a worry that they could have a decent number of those?
I think their period is over. I mean, usually the infection happens between 3 and 5 days. Mm-hmm. And so I think they made it out of the bye week okay. I don't know why there was a massive amount of COVID tests. There weren't that many bye weeks.
You almost have to wonder if there was like a batch of tests that were false positives.
Could be. Or it could be just, weather is changing and people are spending more time indoors, and, the variants are really contagious, and players have to be really, and it's close to the holidays. Family are coming in. They got to be really careful with that stuff.
Todd with a fun question. Why is the offense so slow to start a game now, unlike last year? I heard it explained on Get Up this morning as Aaron Rodgers playing with his food before he decided to clamp down.
Yeah, that is a good question. They have been slow, and last year it seemed like, they just dissected teams right away. I don't think there's anything horrible with that because I think it means they're kind of just feeling teams out. And then as long as they had that kind of second half they did, I mean, they did a really nice job of getting to the plays that they really liked. But maybe they're getting too fancy. Maybe they need to be get to the plays they really like earlier on their script. You know, they'll do a script of 20 plays maybe, and you know, some of them are to set up future plays. Some of them are to see how the defense is going to react. But maybe they need to just go to their core plays earlier. That'll be something worth asking LaFleur.
Especially if they get to the postseason and they're facing a team that has a offense that can strike fast. You know, what happens if you're facing Tampa Bay? You can't afford to get down, 24-14 like you did against the Bears.
And especially with your special teams not playing well, I mean, you might have to score every time. You never know.
There have been several questions about the special teams while we've been in here, so let's just go ahead and tackle that bear. What's wrong? I can't think of any more eloquent way to ask that.
Yeah, I don't think I sort of agree with LaFleur that it's hard to pinpoint one thing, but I was, the more I thought about it, I thought they made some really strategic errors, and he wouldn't bite on that when I threw it in his face, like, hey, why did you do this? And he kind of put it on the players. And I'm like, why didn't you squib kick at the end of the second or first half when gave up a 43-yard return and it set up a field goal? Or, when they had the 97-yard return, why were they trying to, do an Aussie kick instead of just blasting it in the air? And even if it landed on the 20, the guy couldn't return it. Why not just play it safe after you saw what he did that first time? So I think there were some miscalculations. And then the other thing is, I do agree he's going to have to probably start using some of his starters, guys like Rasul Douglas and, Adrian Amos and some of your better tacklers, Devondre Campbell. It's a big risk. You don't want to hurt those guys. You don't want to overwork them. But they will improve your special teams if you use them.
And special teams, the joke is always special teams wins games. It's not necessarily true, but special teams can lose you games.
Oh, yeah. Well, and I always go back, and you're probably sick of this, but when the Packers won the Super Bowl in '96, they had the number one defense in the league. They had a tremendous offense, but they had an outstanding special teams unit, and led by Desmond Howard. But it was the guys around Desmond Howard that made it. They went with veterans, guys who had been around the league. And, it's possible, I don't know, they don't have the salary cap space to do that anymore. You can't do that as much. But maybe you got to start using some of your starters on some of these special teams units.
And then Levi asked, will Amari Rodgers keep the punt return job? I mean, he was trotted right back out there after muffing that punt.
I think they got to take it off. I think you might need something out of him offensively. So let him focus on that and take all that pressure off him on the punt returns. Use Chandon Sullivan. He'll catch it. I think that's all you want right now. And try to give Amari Rodgers, I know they're trying to continue to build his confidence and not let him get too down on himself.
He can't be building his confidence in December.
No. And frankly, I would, if I were them, I'd rather see what he could do on offense with Randall Cobb out. Right. So
they used Alan Lazard a lot in that role last night instead. That at one point they used him on a jet sweep, and he picked up 14 yards plus 15 off of a late hit. So, he ended up with 29 yards total. I was not expecting him to be the one who stepped up in that Randall Cobb role, but he really handled it well. And some of that may have also been because Equanimeous St. Brown went out with a concussion. But do you see his role continuing to grow?
Yeah, I think Lazard will be the beneficiary of Cobb being out. He was kind of a forgotten man during the season, but he is a good slot receiver. And the thing about having him in the slot is that you can use him like a tight end. He's such a good blocker. He can block down. You can run the ball to the outside, and he blocks down. You could, You can use him as a blocker, and then he releases like a tight end, sort of like Robert Tonyan would be doing. There's so many ways to use him. The thing he doesn't have is the really quick area speed, like quickness that Randall Cobb has. Where he can quick sit down in his zone and be there.
Like a juke.
Yeah, or just make a quick move into a hole in the zone and read it. He seems to be better when he's on the move.
Randy pointing out he's happy to see Devondre Campbell back in action since he got hit with COVID. I know we talked about not seeing him show up a ton last night, and then you look at the stat sheet, he was the leading tackler. He went over 100 tackles for the season. Does that just kind of show you what he can do even when not at his best?
Yeah, and I think he was close to at his best in the second half. I thought he was just slow coming out of the gate. And
just been some rust.
Yes, and it could have been COVID. These guys, it's not like they're working out and practicing. It's if you have COVID, I don't know whether he was symptomatic or not. But regardless, he didn't practice all week, and so it's a little different to jump out there. And I thought in the second half he started to look more like himself, and boy, they'll need him next week with Lamar Jackson.
Right, exactly. Eric said he loved your comment about Amari in your article. The Amari Rodgers experiment needs to end. So got a little props there from Eric.
Yeah, I do. I believe that.
Yeah. And then Levi pointing out Dennis Kelly depth signing finally pays off. Absolutely. I mean, can they afford to lose anyone else on that line?
No. They're at bare bones. And, if the next move is you have to play Ben Braden at left tackle or, right tackle, man, you're in trouble. And we don't know the extent of Billy Turner's injury. LaFleur said he doesn't think it's season-ending, which to me, I thought it looked like it was an MCL injury where he got hit from the side and behind. And that's what Aaron Jones did, and it always depends on the severity of it, how bad. We thought Aaron Jones's MCL was really bad, and it turned out he was back in a week. And Billy Turner's had an MCL. He had an MCL at the beginning of the 2020 season, and it took him a couple of weeks. But, those linemen can put braces on, and so it's possible we could see him back in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, and Matt LaFleur, again, didn't give a straight answer necessarily about David Bakhtiari this week, just said, we'll see yet again.
I thought he showed the first amount of optimism, like they're going to try to get him ready this week and see if he can do it. And that's kind of how I interpreted it. But it doesn't mean that he will play. It means they're going to try to fast-track him and get him ready and see how he responds.
That being said, that's the question. If they're going to try to fast-track him, is that just a matter of necessity at this point?
Maybe, but it's probably time. I mean, the guy has had, what has it been, almost 12 months of recovery. He had that procedure for whatever. They still haven't told us what it was. But he's had a lot of practice time. The guy did come back and got in practice time. And so I don't think it's like the same as, if the guy had been out and was just coming back on PUP and you were just setting him up right now. So I think he's a little farther ahead of that.
And then another guy that we should see back at practice this week again, Matt LaFleur said Jair Alexander, bare minimum, should be doing individual work. He was there for all 3 days last week, so we expect to see him back out there again as well. Okay, we're going to take one last question here from Levi, and I think you sort of asked Matt LaFleur about his offensive line musical chairs today. If Bach goes and Turner is out, does Kelly play right tackle over Yash?
Good question. Yeah, good question.
Bach back in there at left, Billy Turner's out. You move Kelly.
I think they'll evaluate how Kelly played and then decide. I think Josh Neiman could play right tackle, and I think he could be okay. Dennis Kelly is a natural right tackle. I mean, that's his position. Neiman's more of a left tackle, but he has played right tackle. So I think it'll come down to experience versus, athletic ability.
Well, we will wait and see. It will be yet again another big one on Sunday. If Lamar Jackson is there, we will wait to see what happens with him this week. We will be there to cover it for you through it all. Stay